welcome everybody to the Yamhill County Leadership Roundtable for Friday. Thanks for all joining. Thank you for joining us today. We have Senator Roblan, we have Mayor Cape of Amity, we've got Joya Goodrum from the McMinnville Chamber of Commerce, we have Abisha Stone from SEDCOR, we have Commissioner Rick Olson from Yamhill County, we've got Representative Ron Noble from the McMinnville area, in a way. We have Representative David Gomberg from the coast and Sheridan, Willamina. We have Miriam Vargas Corona from UNIDOS, Bridging Communities, and we have Mayor Beth Wojtowski from Dayton and Commissioner Kula here. What I would love, if possible, is for us to hold to an hour, since often people have to roll to their next meeting at 2 o'clock. But thank you all for joining us today. I sent out some questions and topics to consider for today. But I'd also like to hear specifically from each of you to the community about what's happening at this moment in coronavirus, public health response, and business response. And I would ask Senator Roblan if he would start, but he is chewing, so.
I'm good.
Okay, great. Senator Roblan, I have a couple of questions for you, and they're mostly around, again, around the framework, the governor's framework, but I also invite you to talk about many other things. So thank you.
Okay. Do you want to ask your questions first? Or you want me to get started? I'll go.
Okay.
Yesterday we had our emergency board, and I'll let Dave talk a little bit more about that because I think it was an attempt by the state with limited resources to put some things in places where we thought there were gaps, and we will continue to watch as the money rolls out from the federal government to make sure we don't spend in places where they're going to cover the money, and we'll get that better as we go along. And I think we did a pretty good job with the limited resources, about 32 million. This morning we had our Economic Advisory Committee meet with the governor's office, and at that meeting, we got some feedback from the 5 working groups that they've got working right now. The one I'm on is retail, but I couldn't make it yesterday because I was on a very long e-board meeting. But the feedback from the restaurateurs and the retail people that came from those subgroups was really good. I mean, I think all of them are engaged and really want to come up with a way to get back to work. And the big issue right now for them is PPE. It came up a lot, making sure that the retail workers are going to have masks and other kind of stuff. And their concern is that we hope that everybody that comes into their establishments will also be wearing masks, because that's an important issue. It's not, they don't need to be the medical grade masks. They just need to be masks. And but they also acknowledge that they don't have the policing to police that, but they would really like to make sure that there's a concerted effort amongst everybody involved, that we encourage people whenever they go out of the house to wear a mask. It just helps protect other people. And so that was a big conversation amongst the retail people. We also had the hotel people starting to ask and talk about it. We've had some conversations. There are different parts of the state that would like to open that up more. Some never closed because it was really the North Coast that had the biggest hit. There's conversations going on in the south counties to start opening up parks again for day use, not for others. So they're working with the state parks to see how they could roll that out. And they want to make sure that before all of our parks open up, that if you're going to open up things, that RV people and other people, long before we open up camping sites up and down the coast, but having some other places for people. We don't mind a few visitors, especially in the south. The north is not quite ready for that, and we need to make sure that we understand the differences between different areas, and the ability to get food into restaurants and food into stores is really important if you start having a lot of visitors coming. So all of those things are being worked out through all these individual groups. They're making recommendations to the governor's office, and this newest group has really picked up with regard to engaging small actual business people, not just the organizations that represent them. So we're getting a lot more of those people engaged in those conversations, which is good. Because of the way the money is being sent out from the state, they're setting up another group to start talking about how does that money get to all parts of the state. I recommended Dave Gomberg for that, so I think they will be calling him to be a part of that one as well. We're moving ahead, and I think we're getting good information. There has not been a real push from the economic group to start too early because they understand the conflict that will evolve there, and the reality that when you open up one place, you might start that vacuum where you suck everybody into it, and they want to know that they're ready. The PPE in the hospitals and the medical professions seem to be in pretty good shape right now. We're kind of figuring that out. We're also really pushing on the federal government to get more testing because that's a big implement. We need to know that kind of stuff so that we can take care of it. We're watching all of our senior housing and those kinds of things because that's where the virus has been hurting the most. We have a little outbreak on the south in Coos Bay area at one of our little prisons that are down here, and we've got the first 5 cases in our county are all in the same facility. We're worried about their employees and whether they're taking that home. So there are real conversations going on about how things can break out of places and how do we make sure that we protect all of our citizens. So I think that's what's happening right now. I'll leave, if you have some questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I think that's the outbreak. The outbreak in on the South Coast is a sobering reminder that when we think that we're moving in one direction and we can start opening things up, or he'll start talking about opening things up, that the virus tells us.
Yeah, so. That's right. Yep.
Joya Goodrum, ready for your.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Roblan. So 2 questions for you. First one, did the Restaurants Association, did they talk about, you know how they have signs, no shirt, no shoes, no service? Yes. Could they do something that says no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service, or something like that? Is that what they're planning?
That came up in almost all of the retail and the restaurant groups, was that it would be really nice if the state could help by coming up with a common signage to go around everywhere, stay apart 6 feet, wear a mask, all of those kinds of things. They would love to have that kind of thing done. So the governor's office was taking that back because just about everybody wanted some kind of consistent signage that would go out. And it would be really helpful if that was produced and paid for by the state or through some of this money coming in from the federal government. So we're looking at that. And I know the governor's office took that into consideration because it came up in almost every one of the working groups.
That's great. I don't know if you're aware of this, but our downtown association did an application to OLCC and the city of McMinnville to close our 3rd Street so that restaurants could spill out into the street and create an opportunity for more social distancing. I know, isn't that brilliant?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
I know, and help our businesses. And there's a couple of other communities that have taken that idea and are moving forward with it. So I'm very excited that we might be able to do that. Do we know where the $32 million from the e-board is going? And did you I didn't hear you talk about that. Maybe I missed it, but I will end my questions there. Thank you.
Yeah, we do know where all of it is going. And I'll let Dave give a bigger explanation of that. Both of us are on that e-board, and I think I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to say a few things too. But it was pretty specific about where it was going. And Dave has some good explanations about a lot of questions he asked about making sure it gets to rural and places that aren't on the I-5 corridor directly. So I think that's really important.
So, Senator, one of the questions I had was, do you have any further knowledge on the plan and the expectations for reopening non-urgent procedures, both dental and medical?
They did come out with the press release yesterday that's going to start happening hopefully by May 1. The individual hospitals have to show a couple of things. They have to, 1, show that they have the PPE necessary to do that. Number 2, they need to be able to show that they're going to keep about 20% free for the opportunity if something were to happen with regard to an outbreak or whatever, so that they can control it. And number 4, that we still need to make sure that we have places for people to quarantine themselves. So I think Most of the hospitals in the rural areas have met those requirements. They feel pretty comfortable that they're there. The next question was, how do we make sure that PPE for dentists, labs, for the clinics and all of those things, and that seems to be happening. We keep saying that, especially for small businesses to open, we need the government to buy and to have those available and to get them out somehow, to get a way to get them, because most little businesses can't find the distributor that can get it to them. I know we've had conversations here that different people are making them. A lot of PPE was being developed by our dentists were actually stopped, and they were producing stuff with their 3D printers. So there is some of that available, and the bigger stores seem to have chains that'll get them the non-medical kinds of masks. A lot of the others don't. So we need to figure out, how do we get that chain going that gets people to the small grocery stores, the little mercantiles, and to all of these medical professionals that are going to get started opening up. But that doesn't seem to be as big a problem now. There seems to be Chinese materials coming in now with M95s, all the different kind of masks and stuff. So we're hopeful that can get out to the people. And as we identify places where it isn't, we need to figure out ways to get it to them. Yes. I hope that answers it. Yeah.
Yes. And along those lines, Abisha, would you be able to talk about what you guys have kind of been working on at SEDCOR?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So I just got off a call right before this call, after my last call, and we were talking about what that is going to look like. So SEDCOR is currently putting together a draft of what we're calling an exchange, and I know some of you have heard it referred to as the Craigslist listing. But we probably should give it its own name. So, we're calling it a supplier exchange portal and system. So we are currently actively working on a page on our website that allows the business partners to go in and to update the types of materials that they do have available. And then businesses to go in there and search by product type. So the way that we currently see this happening is a business would go in, they'd say, I'm looking for masks. They'd go to the mask page, do a drop down, identify what types of masks they're looking for, and be able to find local suppliers that are making that product or providing that product. We actually have a few of our local businesses who have been purchasing some of that material, for example, for their own use at their business, and have had to lay off employees and are now looking to donate materials, for example. So we'll have an opportunity for donation and an opportunity for sale. Of course, we are trying to build in what data needs to be captured by product type. So we are trying, with respect to the fact that some of this material does require FDA approval or certain sorts of certifications. So we will be including that information as well. And all of the suppliers that we'll be putting in there are local suppliers. So we will be verifying that to be the case, though some of their material may have not come from a local source. And so I'm not certain if that will impact any future funding that may identify the need to participate with local suppliers, but that'll also be something to consider as we move forward. I think, Commissioner Kula, that we will have a test program to run through and start building in some of our local suppliers early next week. That's what we're shooting for, and we're really excited about it. Do you want me to just jump in with the rest of my updates?
That would be great. As long as we have more questions for Senator Roblan before we go. I just wanted to make sure we got that at least that wedge of information in, because I've been hearing that that's the major pinch point right now. And in fact, even from hospitals and nurses and hospital administrators, they are telling me, what are we talking about? There's no PPE. And I say we need to connect the people who need to be connected. So
some of the hospital systems, the bigger ones, are actually making their own agreements and getting stuff directly shipped to them, so the state doesn't have the same control over that they had before, because those markets are opening up and they're getting it. But the smaller hospitals are not in those chains, and therefore figuring it out, the state still needs to help us do that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Senator. Thank you. And I know that a lot of these hospitals are competing with the state as, supply for that supply and with each other. And so hopefully this exchange will be a tool in the toolbox that can be used, used by folks. And of course, we at SEDCOR, I know Joya at the McMinnville Chamber, Shannon at the Chehalis Valley Chamber, and Scott Cooper with MEDP are also actively making connections between suppliers and supply needs on a daily basis. And commissioners, I've seen some emails back and forth between you and businesses as well, working to do that same thing. So thank you. Okay, so I'll go ahead. I also wanted a quick update on the Yamhill County Grant Program. So that program closed for applicants as of noon yesterday. We started sorting data at 12:30 yesterday and had 409 applicants. Just over 40 of those either didn't qualify or were duplicates. We actually only had about 3 duplicates. And the ones that didn't qualify were mostly kicked out during the qualification survey, if you will. So that was the first 9 questions or so. And some of those folks were, maybe from outside of the county, and maybe they were just too large of a business to qualify. So the review committee met this morning at 9 a.m. We performed the lottery draw. We reviewed the process of the grant program and just completed a recommendation that I hit send on to the Board of Commissioners about 10 minutes ago. So that is on its way to the Board of Commissioners for review at their Thursday meeting. And just because I have 2 of you on here, to let you know, I will be available by phone to answer questions as well. So we are hoping to get that approval and to get checks cut by the 14th, and there will be 100 grants made available within Yamhill County. And I want to thank Joya, who I see clapping, for participating on the grant committee as well. I wanted to also remind folks that SEDCOR is partnering with regional economic development service partners, such as the Council of Governments, Willamette Workforce Partnership, and others to try to get additional funds to our region to provide immediate business relief. We have jointly written a grant proposal that was submitted on Monday, and hopefully keep your fingers crossed to send prayers, whatever you do to get good energy out there for us, that we're able to bring some of that money into the region. And we continue to look at opportunities to do that. I wanted to share, just, as we're constantly talking about these different SBA programs, that EIDL did make itself available for our agricultural partners. We're finding that our agricultural partners are struggling with some components of that application because it's apparent that these programs did not historically reach agriculture. So a good example is maybe a farmer who grows blueberries, and they're being asked to identify what their potential loss is. Well, that potential loss is going to depend on whether or not they're able to hand harvest or they have to mechanically harvest, which already leads to about a 30% loss. And they won't know that until the season plays out, because they might have 3 varieties that all ripen at different times. So we are trying to help them work through how do you answer this, and certainly our partners have a high level of integrity, and they want to make sure that they're being honest and transparent and also qualifying for what they qualify for. So we are seeing that play out. SEDCOR is there actively supporting those partners. Any guidance from this team is helpful. So please feel free to reach out and let us know if you find anything that could help us in supporting those partners working through those applications. And I think that is all that I have for you. The reopening thing, I guess last is high on our radar, and we are prepared to support our businesses in doing that. And we are actively participating in the regional conversations about what those needs look like. And that's it. Thank you.
Casey, I have a question for Abisha,
oh, yes, please.
Abisha, I'm really glad we got as many grants as we did. Is when we set out to market this, we want to make sure every part of the county was represented, and so we set it up by a lottery for certain cities. Did every one of the jurisdictions have as many as they expected? Did they all turn in that many applications?
That's a great question.
So for instance, did Amity turn in the ones they needed? And
yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate that. So again, we allocated funds based on a regional population-based allocation. So each community, each incorporated city received no less than 2 grants for their region. And then we also have this unincorporated zone. So we called it 11 zones. We had 2 of the 11 zones that, for lack of a better term, underperformed in terms of getting as many applications as they had opportunities to be funded. The city of Sheridan, we received 2 applications for a possible 6 awards. And for the unincorporated area, we received, let me make sure I get my numbers right here, 16 applications. No, I'm sorry. I think it was 16 applications for a possible 18 grant awards. So we ended up creating a 12th zone and reassigning a numerical code to all of the unfunded applicants, and then creating a lottery for the at-large business community so that they got deployed throughout the county. We also were actively marketing in those areas, knowing that there were certain communities where communication might not be as good. We made extra efforts in those areas. So we really did do our best effort at trying to get communication out in those areas.
Great, thank you very much, Abisha. That way to be really flexible and work fast. Yeah, and I wanted to add on to the comments from Abisha about the idle loans and agriculture, and that the Oregon Farm Bureau has an extensive section on their website for farmers going through the updated idle stuff. So hopefully for farmers who don't know where to go, start with the Farm Bureau's resources as well. And you, obviously. What I would love to do is go on to Representative Gomberg, and then Miriam Vargas Corona, and then Representative Noble, if that's okay. I'd love to hear what Representative Gomberg has to say from his perspective on the e-board, and I want to say thanks to both of you for serving on that.
Well, thank you, and with deference to Representative Noble, I don't want to steal all the thunder. But let me start with this, if I may. I think that we're 6 weeks in, and this is a critical point. It's certainly a critical point for families that may have filed for unemployment and have been waiting weeks for their check, or continue to get error notices, and they're wondering how they're going to pay their rent or buy groceries. It's a critical time for a lot of very small businesses that are at a make or break point. And I think we're even approaching a period now where we're seeing increased pressure, which is encouraging some people to violate the rules, whether it be for financial reasons or just to relieve social pressure. We're at a critical time. And we are also seeing that different parts of Oregon are being affected differently economically. And particularly areas that rely on tourism are seeing higher levels of unemployment than many other parts of the state, whether it's in their lodging industry or their retail industry or in their food and beverage industry. And I wanted to use that as a context for the emergency board that met yesterday. And I'll remind you that the emergency board is a subset of the legislature, about 20 members, senators and representatives, who are empowered to spend money when the legislature is not in session. Now, there's a limit to how much money they can spend, and right now they're working with about a $50 million pot. It started out at $75 million, but they met at the end of, the beginning of March. I believe it was the 9th of March that they met, and spent $25 million. So they've got $50 million left. And they met in a virtual meeting yesterday, which has never been done before. And they allocated about $30 million. $12 million of that went for rental assistance and safe shelter alternatives for individuals that may have lost income because of COVID-19. And also to shelter people that are at risk of infection or health problems. I think it's significant to say that when we're giving money to people that can't pay their rent, what we're really doing is asking them to go to their community action agencies and qualify. And should they qualify for this rent assistance, the money is given to their landlords, not to the tenants. We allocated $10 million for workers who have paid into the unemployment fund but are ineligible for wage replacements and can't get unemployment benefits. we allocated $10 million for an assistant program for small businesses that have no more than 25 employees. Now that's particularly important to me because we've been seeing all these federal dollars coming in, and they're being allocated primarily to larger small businesses based on the federal definition that you're small if you're under 500 employees. And setting a program up for folks with fewer than 25 is a lot more realistic in the kind of economic environment that we live in. I'll come back to that in just a minute. But I also wanted to mention that we allocated $3.35 million for long-term care workers, that is people that are working in assisted living or providing long-term care, for their testing and training. And we allocated $2 million for emergency housing for victims of domestic and sexual violence. And very sadly, we're seeing a spike in domestic and sexual violence during this period of time. Finally, we allocated money that is going to go for our forest fund to prepare for the upcoming fire season. So let me go back to the small business aspect. And I said that I'm very pleased that we're allocating money for smaller businesses. But I also expressed some concerns yesterday about the way that money is available, because we said that it would be dispersed through CDFIs, a particular set of financial institutions. Now, the issue that I raised is that most of them are in Portland, and the rest of them are along the I-5 corridor. We don't have one in Yamhill County. We don't have one in Lincoln County. We don't have one in Tillamook counties or Polk County, the areas that I represent. Now, these are good people, and their job is to work with the entire state. But I think we all know that it would be naive to suggest that proximity is not an asset when you go looking for money. And it's easier to get it from somebody that you've got a working relationship with than somebody that's 100 miles away. And I wanted to make sure that those dollars get to businesses throughout the state, particularly our part of the state. And I wanted to ensure that we're focused not just on reaching the most people, but also reaching the people that are hurt the most in this current environment, which brings me back to that comment that I made about the tourism industry. So the emergency board met yesterday and made those allocations. I expect that they will be calling another meeting probably in the next 10 days to discuss funding for our rural hospitals. There was a proposal on the agenda that was going to provide loan money for rural hospitals. But through the discussion, we decided that in some cases we wanted to make those grants or forgivable loans. And so they're going to take that proposal back, tweak it, and call us back in a second time to approve that. Final thing I wanted to share with all of you is that the Coastal Caucus will be meeting this afternoon. I'm not sure whether that's my 7th or 8th Zoom meeting today. I get no sympathy for Senator Roblan. I think he's ahead of me on that count. But we're going to be meeting, and we're going to be sitting down with county commissioners from up and down the coast, one from each of our coastal counties, discussing the issue of how we reopen in a coordinated fashion. Some counties are ready to reopen now. Others are concerned that they're not quite ready, and what will happen if they open the doors and people come in from other areas with higher infection rates. So we want to have that conversation about how we do this in a coordinated and comprehensive fashion. That's a discussion that's going on today, which brings me in conclusion to a question that I wanted to ask you, commissioners, and that is that I received your letter today urging me to support your request to reopen Yamhill County. My question to you in evaluating that request is, what are your plans for dealing with the influx of visitors from other parts of the state or other states? Should we open the door, since you too are a tourist zone? And I come to you from the context of discussing that with coastal communities, but I wanted to get your take on it as an area that focuses on ag tourism.
Great question, Representative Gomberg. Commissioner Olson, do you mind if I add some thoughts first? Okay. Representative Gomberg, I think it's very, very important that we make sure we have everything in place, from comprehensive contact tracing to adequate personal protective equipment, before we discuss or even make plans that are outside of what the governor's plans are. And I've been following the governor's plans very closely, as have a lot of you here. And I'm honestly quite delighted by how quickly they are moving. I see everyday updates on new aspects, and I really think that we are best suited to encourage the governor to work on her plans in concert with everybody here, rather than going it alone. So that's my brief answer.
Okay, Casey, I have a question for Representative Gomberg. You know, the thing that you're going to be on the call with the Coastal Caucus, and as commissioners, we've been involved and gone to some of the Coastal Caucus meetings, and you talked about, you know, what's Yamhill County going to do. I was wondering if we couldn't get the link, some of us get the link to that Coastal Caucus Zoom meetings, so you know, maybe we can learn from what they're doing and what's discussed for things we can bring back to Yamhill County.
Excellent idea, Commissioner. I will forward that to the chair of the Coastal Caucus and see if we can get that plugged in. Arnie, my memory is that we're not doing a Zoom meeting; we're just doing a telephone conference this afternoon.
We just do a telephone conference, and they bought a line. I don't know how many people can be on it, so that's why you should talk to the president, our leader of the Coastal Caucus, to get permission. But I think it would not be bad for you to listen in, because I think we know we're going to have a bigger conversation down here in Coos and Douglas. They're looking at opening up camping sites, RV sites, and that kind of stuff on the South Coast. They don't necessarily want to do that on the North Coast yet, and they're trying to have a conversation with parks. So that's why we're having this bigger conversation, because we think we don't want to start causing problems for each other as we start doing this opening kind of thing. Most of the closures that happened on the coast were by the counties. They weren't by the state. So most places didn't close hotels, and they didn't close bread and breakfasts, and they didn't close that stuff. I don't know what your county did, but they sure did in the North Coast. They closed it all down. Because they just got overwhelmed and they didn't have any food left in their grocery stores for the locals. And I mean, it got pretty bad there for a while. They were very frightened. So they're going to come back a little bit slower than the rest of us. And down in the South Coast, I think this little problem we're having right now in our jail, our community corrections facility, is going to give them pause to think about it for a little while. But it's still a conversation that we have to have. So. So Dave, do check on that. If we can, we'll get you a link so you can call in.
And to go back to the Abisha is back with us. She fell over, but I'm glad that you have righted yourself. I don't mean to make light of this conversation, because this is a very important conversation, especially about what counties can do in the context of a greater coordinated effort by the governor's office. And to reiterate, I've been very impressed lately by the coordination and the willingness of the governor to jump on call after call after call and be inundated with information from people around the state. So I've been grateful for that. But I also want to acknowledge that the Association of Oregon Counties said, hey, give us your county plans, and we'll give them for opening, and we'll give them to the governor's office. But I saw, as we were sitting here, I received an email from the head of the AOC saying, hold off, because the governor is providing us with guidance. And so I want to acknowledge that in my own experience, and I'm taking up too much time, but I apologize, in my experience with the coronavirus and the response to it, sometimes I am 2 days ahead of other people, and sometimes I'm 2 days behind other people. And a good example of this was really at the very beginning, somebody said, this is all fear mongering. And I was like, I have more information than you. I'm just 2 days ahead of you. The same person came to me and said, we need to mandate masks for everybody when they're out in public. And I said, I think I'm 2 days behind you. So it's helpful to me to think about where where counties are versus where the state is in this whole conversation, and which is 2 days ahead or 2 days behind. But I really appreciate Representative Gomberg, you're asking about it, because it's a very important thing. And Abisha has a question.
Yeah, so a quick question for Representative Gomberg. You had mentioned the additional unemployment fund of $10 million to support folks who are not able to access unemployment. And it sounded to me like you were touching on this scenario where, for example, construction, where maybe a construction worker had been unemployed throughout the winter, so exhausted all of their unemployment benefits, and now that unemployment has been extended by no fault of their own. Is that the sort of application for those funds? We get a lot of that inquiry.
No, it's not. But let me talk about the scenario that you raise, and that is that historically, people who are self-employed, contractors, gig workers were not eligible for unemployment compensation. That's a little maddening because they're paying into it, but they can't get out of it. The federal government has, during this particular environment, has changed the rules so that those contractors and gig workers and the self-employed who are now out of work can qualify for unemployment. That's the good news. The bad news is now that the feds have given us the word, we have to reprogram our software, which is taking hours and hours and hours. And so people that are making those applications haven't been able to get into the queue. We're close to getting that fixed, and we're expecting news in the next few days that gateway is open. But currently they are qualified for unemployment, but they're not being processed for unemployment, and they will be able to get it eventually. They need to file now, but may likely end up in that cash flow problem that I made reference to with a lot of people that have qualified but aren't getting their checks yet. The money that was allocated yesterday is going to go to a variety of different people who don't qualify for unemployment compensation, even though they're working and even though they're paying in. An example of that might be undocumented employees who don't get unemployment. So that's really what we were talking about more yesterday, and a process to make sure that they're paying in, they're no longer working. Can they get some kind of benefit that they have paid for?
Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you, Representative David Gomberg, for giving us an update about the emergency board. And you know, the fund that you're speaking specifically to right now is the Oregon Workers Relief Fund, which is something that UNIDOS Bridging Community has been doing advocacy for, and I hope you have all of our state legislature representatives have heard from local constituents about that. I'm wondering if if you're hearing from Governor Brown about the possibility to hold a special session. I know that she had been waiting to see how much funding Oregon would receive from the federal government. And yes, like, we are super thankful, and that $10 million for the Oregon Worker Relief Fund will certainly help a lot of our immigrant community members, but we are estimating that to serve 74,000 folks in the state of Oregon that needs this economic relief, we need $124 million. So 10 million is a good start, and it's great that we're receiving that. So thank you so much. But I'm just wondering, what are you hearing from Governor Brown about a special session? I think this funding, the 30 million, is certainly going to help a lot of Oregonians, but we know that, you know, things are changing almost daily, and I don't think that this is going to be the end of, you know, things that our local government is going to need to pass to support our communities. Well,
first of all, let me say this must be maddening for Representative Noble that the rest of us are getting all the good questions before we get to him. You know, I sit and listen to the questions going to Arnie, and then you sit and listen to the questions coming to me. I hope that you're storing up some really good, interesting, provocative questions for Representative Noble. He's earned them as well. Now that being said, the special session. You know, Senator Roblan co-chaired a special committee that came up with a number of issues, questions, and proposals that we believed needed to be addressed. After that committee concluded its business, the governor was able to implement a number of those by executive order. The emergency board was able to begin addressing a number of others that the committee came up with in the meeting that took place yesterday. And I believe that there are still some questions that we haven't quite gotten to that may either need more money or a legislative change. What we are hearing about a special session is that we are holding off on calling it. I say we, I should say the governor is holding off on calling it for two reasons. The first is we want to make sure that we completely understand what we're getting from the federal government and what the requirements are that go along with it. Because if we allocate spending or make commitments that conflict with those federal dollars and federal requirements, we may eliminate our eligibility to get those monies. So we're taking some time to make sure we understand what the feds are doing to us. The second thing that's going on is that we are looking at a revenue forecast that's going to come in mid-May. A revenue forecast, for anybody that's listening in, is when the state economist comes and tells the legislature, here's what kind of tax dollars we expect you're going to get. And we know that we're going to have less money. We're going to have less income tax dollars because people are working less. We are going to have less lottery dollars because people are playing the lottery less. We're going to have less gas tax money because even though gas is cheap, people are driving less. We're going to have less lodging money because people aren't staying in hotels. The only place we're going to see increases are going to be with alcohol and cannabis money, which is interesting, but is not enough to really turn things around. So we need to know how much money we've got before we make decisions about how much we can spend. And so I would expect that we will likely get called in late May after we get the revenue forecast, and by then we'll know what the feds are asking of us in return for the dollars they're sending.
Great, thank you very much, Representative. Miriam, would you, oh, there's one question from Joya. No. Miriam.
I'm Italian. I talk with my hands. Sorry, I'll be really quick. I was emailed by a not-for-profit here in McMinnville that deals with domestic violence and child abuse, and they asked how they would get the funding because they had heard about the $10 million, right? So I'm just curious, how would they go about asking for that money? Thank you.
I'm going to defer to Senator Roblan in a moment, but I also want to say that the small business money is not only available to small businesses, but also to nonprofits, which is something that you might want to put in your back pocket. Arnie, do you recall the application process for the domestic violence dollars?
It's also chambers. C6s can actually apply for some of the other money. So just so you know, because we knew that was a gap in the other one. When it comes to, it was about $2 million for the domestic violence stuff, and it went to Rosenblum and their department to figure out how to deal with that. So I don't know how they're going to distribute it. I don't know what they're going to do and how they're going to take care of that, but it will be through our department that has to do with that. So, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Miriam, what would you like to either ask or tell people here, and also out into the community, both in Spanish and in English, if you would like?
I'm going to do it just in English because I need to jump off to finish a grant that's due in 14 minutes. But I just wanted to share for some of our state legislators that are not as familiar with the UNIDOS region community, we are the only organization in Yamhill County that specifically serves our Latinx community members. And I saw on some of the things that this group wanted to talk about was assistance or resources for farm workers. So aside from the Oregon Worker Relief Fund, there is not a whole lot that our farm workers and immigrants are able to tap into as far as resources for economic relief if they do not have an immigration status where they can get those. So if you're undocumented, there's virtually nothing else available to you except for food banks and the benefits from the WIC program. So that's why UNIDOS, we have been doing a ton of advocacy for the Oregon Worker Relief Fund. And I want to give a special thank you and shout out to Representative Noble. This Wednesday night, we had a virtual meeting with some community members where he heard the stories of folks that are really having a tough time economically right now. And so I just want to invite Representative Gomberg and Senator Roblan. We are going to extend an invitation to you to also hear from constituents in your district. Also, we're hoping to reach out to our commissioners to also hear these personal stories. We really think that putting a face to the issue is really important. So I hope you accept our invitation when that is extended to you. We know that there's an organization in Woodburn, Bekun, the Farm Worker Labor Union. Right now, they are doing some fundraising to help the members of their union, but they're primarily in Marion and Polk County. So essentially in Yamhill County, there is no organization that serves farm workers as their main mission. Of course, that is part of the constituency of UNIDOS. And through a program of ours, that's the Latino Advocacy Coalition, we have been meeting weekly, almost weekly, with organizations that serve farm workers. These are Head Start, the Oregon Child Development Coalition, public libraries, WorkSource, schools, etc. So even though their primary mission is not to serve farm workers, we are all serving this population. So I just wanted to let you know that we are working as a community to make sure that our farm workers and their families are receiving information about all these new resources that are being developed by the community, and making sure that it's in Spanish. That has been a big barrier. So in a sense, we're all having to become resource navigators for our farm working populations and our Spanish speaking populations. It's hard work, but I really want to commend all of our community partners that are stepping up to fill this gap. So I think that's the main thing that I wanted to share with you all. Okay.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And it looks like there, do you have a time for question? Abisha has
sure.
a question.
Yeah, and this isn't so much a question for Miriam, but an opportunity for a resource. So I want to ask our representatives on the line here. I just was informed that our local workforce board, Willamette Workforce Partnership, was allocated $450,000 for our region in a dislocated worker program. I'm curious, some of those funds can be directed for direct support. Do you know if that sort of direct support can also be applied to our undocumented farm workers?
I do not know the answer to that question. I will tell you that many times, if it's money that's coming from the federal government, there are strings attached, which don't allow it to be used that way. But so you need to check that. That's one of the reasons why this Worker Relief Fund was such an important one for us to get started. So I don't know the answer. I will tell you that I have been working closely with Bakun and with Causa about the Worker Relief Fund, and felt pretty comfortable talking about it yesterday. So that money is going to go directly to those community groups. I don't know if you're getting some in the group in Yamhill County, but they were going to deliver the money directly to the people through the Oregon Community Foundation, would then send it out to these local community groups. And I'm hopeful that'll get to the right people in the right way. So I'm excited about that.
Yes, we expect that UNIDOS will help community members apply for this assistance. So I think we'll be, in essence, helping to fill out those applications and navigate the process along with community members.
Great. Thank you very much, Miriam. It looks like Representative Noble has a question for you as well.
Not a question as much as a comment. Miriam, I appreciate UNIDOS taking the time to meet with me this week, and would encourage my colleagues to jump on and meet with you as well. It was very informative, and I appreciate it. And I know the $32 million in the e-board, my colleagues, I just want to say thank you for all of the work you've done, including the Oregon Worker Relief Fund. It's a good start.
Yes, definitely. And I'm just waiting for Jules to get back to me about my date, so to talk. All right, good. Thank you very much, Miriam. And if you have more questions, please direct them to her through email, and we'll try to get her back on here too. Representative Noble, what delicious questions can we send your way? And what would you like to tell people in the community?
I appreciate Senator Roblan and Representative Gomberg taking all the softballs. Just want to, I don't have anything new other than I appreciate the letter from the county commissioners. And as we navigate this process of ensuring our health and safety of our communities and then the economic recovery, just to reiterate, I think it's been said, but PPEs, our ability to track and to test, I think are critical as we begin to open up. We need to be able to monitor what the impacts are, so that we are doing this wisely. So there are a lot of moving parts. I'll just take a moment to thank my two colleagues, both the senator and the representative, being on the e-board for Senator Roblan's work and the joint committee. I think that Yamhill County is well served, and to have both of them in positions to have direct input. Looking forward to a chance to get into a special session when the time's appropriate, so we have the ability to maybe fill in some more gaps. It is a tricky kind of a maneuvering, since the federal government seems like they've met, they have met more often than we have. But if we meet too soon and start filling in the gaps, like Representative Gomberg said, we could lose out on some assistance and our money won't go as far. So thanks for the opportunity. I won't repeat anything that's been said. I know that we have a few more people to talk, so thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Representative. Are there any questions for Representative Noble? Joya.
Of course I have a question. So the money, all of the 32 million is coming through the AG Rosenblum's office, or is it just that 2 million?
Just the 2 million.
Okay, so other organizations, how would they apply for the money?
So if you're wanting some of the small business money, that's going to go through, as Dave said earlier, these I can't remember what they're called.
No, that goes through CDFIs. They're financial institutions.
And through OBDD. So the Business Oregon is going to do some of it. 5 million and 5 million, I think, is how it's split into it. And they did some earlier on, so it'll be through those groups.
You did say that. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No problem. No problem.
And the housing money will go through community action agencies. You've heard a little bit about the undocumented, the uncovered worker relief. Mm-hmm. And the domestic violence dollars coming through the Attorney General. So
great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Another question for Abisha.
Yeah, one thing to just share to close the loop on that conversation. We do have, again, we don't have necessarily local CDFIs in this area, but we do have a relationship with Craft 3, who's a CDFI out on the coast, who has historically supported work done in the county, and SEDCOR has been in communication with them, and we can help you make contact as well.
Yeah, they've been a really great partner. They were the people behind the program that we put together about getting septic systems fixed and others. And they used to have a different name when they sounded more like a C place before they became Craft 3. But they're out of Washington as well, and they have been a really good statewide partner.
Well, unless there are more questions for Representative Noble, I would actually like to move on next to Mayor Cape of Amity. And I wanted to ask him to speak to the citizens, the residents of Amity, and also to talk about the experience at Salem-Keizer School District, if you would.
Well, what in particular would you like to know about the school?
How are things going right now with distance learning there, and your role in helping with the food distribution and the incident command is what I understood, your command bus.
Well, the command bus is more, that's my office space. So we have a separate, it started out as an emergency operations center for the school district, and then they changed it to just a normal district operations center. But it's a separate office space, I guess. So my office, that bus is designed more for, a horrible event, a mass shooting type situation, and then we would have an office that we could take, and it's actually a pretty neat bus if you're into school buses and whatnot. it's one of the most technologically advanced facilities in our school district. So it's kind of a neat place for me to get to work. But you know, the school district is working really hard. Their focus is on getting the seniors to graduation and getting all the other students and their families to get on board with the distance education and the learning programs. They have distributed, I believe it's like 30,000 Chromebooks to students throughout the district, and some staff. There are some staff members that didn't have the Chromebooks too, and so we're now at the point where we're going door to door to finish distributing those to people that were not able, no transportation or whatnot, to come into the facility to get one of those. And so I know the staff. My wife is also a teacher in the school district, and so the staff is working hard on delivering lesson plans, and working with students on a one-on-one basis as needed, and trying to make sure the kids keep getting to their, learning at the levels that they need to be to move on to the next grade. The big thing that we're still looking at is trying to figure out summer school. And Salem Kaiser has an enormous number of programs that they run through the summer. Some of it is maybe tutoring to get kids that fell behind, get them caught up. Some of it is cultural education. There's an Indian education program, for example, for Native American students to participate in. We have programs where we call Jumpstart for new students at each level, kindergartners, and sixth graders and ninth graders, so that they learn where their bus stop is going to be, and to get them through an introduction at their next school. And so those programs happen a little bit later. So there's just a bunch of those programs, and trying to figure out if they're going to operate or not. And then also Salem Kaiser also passed a big construction bond too. So also, where are those programs going to be is a big question, because several schools are under construction, and so just a lot of moving parts. That's one of the biggest things, and trying to figure out what's that next step, and what's that looking like. And listening to the governor's framework presentation that she had yesterday for local elected officials, she mentioned too, they're not even really looking at the phase 2 reopening yet, and looking at things, that's the up to 50 persons gathering, which to me, that's kind of where schools are going to fit in, because you're looking at class sizes of anywhere from 25 to, when I was teaching, I had a class of 52 kids once. So, I think that's right in that ballpark, and they're not even ready to look at that yet, because they're still trying to piece together the parameters of what phase 1 is going to look like. So, to me, I'm not really anticipating hearing something about next school year till later this summer, maybe July. I think people always look for timelines, and I think that's an appropriate timeline from all the things that I'm hearing. And so for me, knowing that probably also means a lot of those summer programs are probably not going to happen. Of course, we haven't heard anything official on that yet. So, and then my job in particular is more on the transportation side, working with the bus drivers and making sure we have enough people to deliver the meals. We're the second largest school district in the state, and I think we're delivering almost twice as many meals on a daily basis than Portland Public Schools, the largest school district, and to more than twice as many locations. We have 36 schools that we're delivering to, plus 2 apartment complexes. And so it's a large number of places that we're getting meals to. And then we also have the volunteers that and staff members that are working there to deliver those and having to follow the guidelines, you know, the 6 foot physical spacing and the sanitation and disinfecting of materials as well. So just a lot of moving parts there. We're also going through and disinfecting and cleaning all of our school buses. We have approximately 300 buses, and just going through and making sure those are all sanitized and clean. Of course, one good advantage is those buses aren't really being run every day, so we're getting caught up on maintenance, which is a real big benefit. We are still most schools, all schools need bus drivers, and so we are still in a position where we are hiring and training bus drivers. There's a lot more restrictions on that, makes it a little bit more difficult, but we are moving forward with that. Our hope is that I'm hoping we can be fully staffed when we do open up the schools again, and that would hopefully allow me to do my job of supervising and helping bus drivers and not just being a bus driver myself. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea for, at least from my perspective, Salem Kaiser and where they're at. I think they're doing a good job of moving forward with stuff. So as far as the city of Amity itself, you know, we're moving along with trying to come up with a list of resources and projects, you know, that I think it was mentioned, you know, where are we, where are those areas where we are losing revenue right now because of the COVID-19 and the pandemic. And so that's one of the big things that our staff is working on, is developing that list. One of the things that I would really love to see from our state and federal representatives in Congress and the legislature is there's been a lot of talk and a lot of assistance for a lot of our utility services. The one that I mentioned this last week too, you know, the one that we haven't really heard a lot of help for is what I think is probably the most important utility, which is clean water for our residents for health and safety. And so I'm just hoping that we can find some way of providing an avenue for people that have fallen behind on their water and wastewater utility accounts to get some relief from that. We're really handcuffed with the loans that we've had to apply for our water infrastructure. You know, we can't give it away. We can't forgive their accounts, and there's several of them right now. You know, after 2 or 3 months, they're already looking at, you know, $400 or $500, and it's getting more and more every month. So I think that's a huge resource that needs to be addressed. I hope that's something that we can all get behind and find some way to provide some assistance for people with that. Upcoming, the one big thing I wanted to mention is May 6th is our next regular scheduled council meeting. It's going to be kind of a big meeting for us. We have 2 land use issues on our agenda. So there's a lot of interest from the public, at least historically, on at least one of them, dealing with the proposal for Dollar General to come to the city of Amity. And so with the executive order that the governor put out recently regarding public meeting law requirements, and so we are moving ahead with having that meeting. We do still have to, the timelines on that from the state law are still really strict, so we do have to hold that meeting and those hearings. But I really want people, if they feel compelled to have their opinion heard and voiced, that they do so in writing and submit as many comments as they can and feel needed by either email or written, and submit it to the city, and so that their opinion can be on the record. We will be conducting a meeting electronically through Zoom, just like we did our last council meeting. And so, but we will, because of that, we will have a time limit for people that are able to get through to for comments. And so, again, another reason why we'd like to have all of their opinion heard in writing, so that because we will need to limit that to get through everything in our timelines. So that's just probably the biggest thing that I have to say. And so yeah, other than that, kind of a dreary day outside, so I came inside for this meeting. But thank you again all for having me. If anybody has any questions, but
yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. Are there any questions for Mayor Cape? All right, thank you very much for both of those updates. I really appreciate hearing what's happening. Commissioner Olson, before we get off for the day, what would you like to say to people in the community and hear a raid?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. You know, I really don't want to have too much to say, but what I want to do is take the opportunity. I know Commissioner Sterrett is not online, but I want to take the opportunity to thank my two fellow counselors, Chair Kula and Commissioner Sterrett. You know, Representative Noble made reference to the letter that the county submitted to our legislatures regarding what we felt needed to be done. Technically, like any other thing that as politicians we deal with, there was a lot of differences of opinions. I look at Commissioner Kula. I'm not a numbers and a statistical person, so I really value what Commissioner Kula brings because he's a numbers and statistical person. And in order for me to support that letter, there were two very distinctive points of view in that letter, and I wasn't really willing to support that letter until we can come up with a consensus of what that letter would be. We spent in two meetings probably an hour and a half to almost 2 hours discussing content and everything with that letter till we got to the point where we could build a consensus, and everybody didn't get everything they wanted out of it, but we could build a consensus on the right message to send to our legislatures, to send to the governor. And I think as politicians, whenever you can build that consensus, and we do have a lot of different opinions on our commission, but anytime you can build that consensus and put out consensus, you're much more powerful speaking as one voice. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Commissioner Kula and Commissioner Sterrett for working so hard and taking the hour and a half to 2 hours just to talk about one simple letter that basically that Representative Noble got. That was a consensus of all three commissioners, and we were all able to sign on to. So that's all I have, Casey.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Olson. And I just wanted, are there any last comments, questions?
Just very quickly,
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. While we've been meeting today, I reached out to my staff to see whether I could get Commissioner Olson on the Coastal Caucus call this afternoon. The phone line has a limited number of participants. We're booked up, but we're going to see if we can get him in through the back door by merging with somebody. If he could email his best phone contact to my office, we'll do our best to get him on the call.
Well, I think I talked to the commissioner. I think I don't want to create trouble for anybody or diff work for anybody else because we all have enough. And I'm in fairly much contact quite a bit with the Coos County commissioners and Curry County commissioners and my friends at Lincoln and County and Tillamook County and Clatsop County. So I'll just bug them directly.
All right. Well, you'd be welcome. We'd like to get you in if you're interested, but for now, let us know if we can do anything else. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Representative.
And the only thing I was going to say is, with Beth not being able to see her on the phone, I was hoping she could see Mayor Cape because I think he was wearing a shirt for her today, and I wouldn't want her to miss out on that.
I think that she can see it, so she just didn't want to say anything. And again, thank you to Mayor Witowski for hosting all of us. And the city manager for the city of Dayton says, "Go Beavs," who's on as an audience member. So thank you very much.
I didn't think there was any problem with Mayor K's shirt. I took a little piece of masking tape and put it over the bottom half, anything below his head, and I didn't have to look at it.
Oh my gosh. With that, what I will do, I just wanted to say to the residents of Yamhill County that I ask for their patience as we work with the state and with the people arrayed here to put plans in place to reopen